Welcome to the Creative Play and Podcast Network. Join us as we share our favorite RPGs, one-shot games, tabletop games, reviews, and convention panels. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, this is Kelly, aka Trixie from Ragnarok and Roll, assigned to Ragnarok Story, and Tilda Wimblewick from D&D Journey of the 5th Edition. First off, I would just like to say thank you to everyone for listening to our varied adventures, as well as for rating us on iTunes and RPGpodcast.com. If you haven't rated us yet, we would greatly appreciate it if you could. And if you're looking for more ways to support our efforts, we are now on Patreon, a great site where you can help us continue making more podcasts, as well as some special surprises for our patrons. If you can, please look us up at www.patreon.com/cppn. Every little bit helps. And again, thank you for listening.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Aww. We're together being geeks. It's the best.
Should we close the door now?
Yes. Hey. Do we want to just start with telling people what the panel is about and introducing ourselves? Sure. Yeah. Ashley, let's start with introductions and then we'll dive into what the panel's about. So, Ashley, would you start us off with introductions?
Of course I will. My name is Ashley, and this is my first time to TusCon, so I'm very excited to be here. Yes, I am a lifelong Trekkie. I grew up watching it with my mom. One of my earliest memories is staying up way past my bedtime to watch Next Gen with my mom on the couch. And I'm super excited about this new age of Star Trek that we're in. So that's what we're going to be talking about.
Yay!
My name is Chaz Kemp. I am an illustrator from Denver. I've done probably close to 300 book covers, magazine covers, that sort of thing, interior illustrations, etc. for a wide variety of different companies, indie authors, on and on and on. I've been a Star Trek fan pretty much all my life, and it's just really cool to finally be at a place where, in our collective consciousness and in this time of our lives where we can actually be bold and proud and say we really love geeky things, especially things like Star Trek, and not, get taken around behind the school and thrown in the dumpster for it. So.
I love that.
My name is Tanya Gouchenour, and collectively we're sort of known as the Rhoynish Turtle Conservation Society, which is a deep, nerdy Game of Thrones joke. But I enjoy coming to TusCon to talk about nerdy stuff. I have been a fan of Star Trek since I was probably, I was introduced to it through Next Gen because my mom was like, this is really great and you should watch it. And it turned out I agreed. And I am also really loving all this new Trek content we've gotten. And I'm excited to talk about it.
Hi, everybody. Most of you know me as Madame Askew, but right now I'm the mysterious woman who plays Madame Askew on TV. My name is Jocelyn, and I'm a massive addict of Star Trek, and I'm happy to be here today. It started with Wesley Crusher on episode 1 of Next Generation, and it just hasn't stopped since then. I am an entertainer, a performer, a costumer, a geek, reviewer, and I love being in the space with everybody, and it's delightful to be able to pull back the screen and be the person who loves fandom talking about fandom with my friends.
We do have a new person.
Yes.
I'm not new, just late.
You're still shiny. You're fresh out of the package.
My name is Wendy, and I am a long-time TusCon resident. I've lived here for over 40 years. No, almost 40 years. My Star Trek background actually started with the original series as reruns. And my parents are both science fiction nerds. When I ran out of books to read as a teenager, I found my dad's stash. So when Star Trek, especially when I got older and Next Generation came out, I think that's where I really fell in love with it, because I found characters I could identify with. So, and then since then, it's just, the only things I haven't seen are the animated ones. I'm getting there.
So just to let you all know that we are talking about today specifically as a group of people who clearly like Star Trek. Our panel this is right now the golden age of Star Trek. And for many years we languished with no Star Trek aside from the films. Then in 2017, Discovery premiered, issuing a new golden age of Trek. Today we'll explore strange new worlds, discuss new characters and new plot lines, and boldly go where no one has gone before. I'm very excited. And so, Wendy, you're starting us out with a little bit about our favorite Jean-Luc.
So,
Yes.
when we were talking about our favorite modern stuff, Next Generation, like I said, really, and I think for a lot of people, especially around my age group, that was the one that really pulled people in. So I wanted to go back to those characters, and I wanted to stick with them. And Picard does that. It feels like, to me, one of the things I really love about it is it's kind of a love letter to the fans, in a way. And you know, my husband and I have debates and pick parts apart and things like that, but I don't think I'm here for that. The thing I particularly love about Picard is that it's both familiar and new at the same time. We've got familiar characters, it's in the future, so this is what they've been doing all this time, right?
Wendy, I'm going to just pause you for a minute. Whoever has their cell phone alarm on, if you could turn that on for us, thank you very much. Please go ahead.
And, now where was it? Oh,
Familiar and new.
familiar and new, and it is because, number one of the things that I love about most of the Star Trek is not done in Picard, and so my husband specifically stopped watching it for this reason, but I still love the stories and kept watching, and that is the episodic nature of most of the Star Trek series we're familiar with, where you have kind of a long-term story of the relationships between the people on the ship, but each episode has a conclusion. It has a solution or a resolution. Whereas Picard is each season has a solution or a resolution. And that was something that I know some people, that was a big critique. You know, some people were expecting that episodic where this problem is solved and now we move on to the next one. And so I had to, that first season, I had to kind of take a step back and say, this is something different, but familiar characters, so this new concept. And it also, I think, especially, and I think, like I said, I haven't seen the animated ones yet, but all of the other ones still address, just like Roddenberry did in our original series, still address social issues of today in one way or another. And I love that it continues that. So that's where I'm at on Picard. Is there any more detail you would like to hear? I'm trying also not to be spoiler either.
Oh,
Well, I mean, I'll just throw this out. I'm going to throw this out there. We're going to talk about all of it. If you do not want to be spoiled on any aspect, this is your warning. You can stick your fingers in your ears, or you can wander forth. And we won't hold it against you if you leave, because you don't want spoilers. But I think we should be able to. We just talk about all of it.
Okay, so first season, addressing the issue and the fears and the anxieties around AI.
Yeah, that was good.
And really addressing or stating, kind of implying this is what could happen if we allow those fears to run things. And this is how potentially people we would empathize with who are AI would be treated. And it's also a statement, a social statement just on inequity and inequality as well. However, I think it really plays to the anxieties that we're having, especially in the past couple of years. Yeah.
At the time, I felt like because the AI debate had not quite blown up in that moment, it felt like it was a lot more of a meditation on what it means to have equity and what it means to be a sentient being worthy of like body autonomy and human rights, which is also like a very pertinent conversation that we're having right
Absolutely.
now. So I thought that was part of what really elevated that first season, was that very timely conversation.
It was the measure of a man, but over
Yes.
an entire.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
It's the same messages that we're getting
My
from that.
my favorite episode.
It was like they went from there and they were like, well, how, like, let's take that conversation further.
Yeah, which I love, because I think a lot of people, that's their favorite episode.
Yeah.
Like, most people know Measure of a Man. And
Yeah.
so taking that and being able to really dissect it over an entire season.
We actually screened that at TusCon, a couple years ago.
Is everyone familiar with the episode we're talking about?
Data's on trial.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just wanted to check.
Basically, Star Trek wants to, or the Federation wants to take data and make lots and lots of datas so they can serve on every ship.
Little pieces.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, I want to treat
But-
them like a tool.
Well, and ultimately, it was a situation where it's like, well, if one starship can have A data, then all starships should have A data, and then basically, they take this wondrous machine, and then weirdly enough, they objectify it.
Yeah.
And it's the fight against the objectification, which in Picard, to kind of bring it back around a little bit, you guys, you were saying, and rightly so, that they took that episode and kind of took it forward. And it's also a discussion about the fact that it's like, well, we have these artificial beings, we should use them to our advantage. We don't necessarily want to objectify them, but then there was also the situation where people felt like they could theoretically be replaced, which is also what we're talking about too, with AI, especially AI art and ChatGPT, where people are like, well, pretty soon we're not going to need artists or authors because the machines will just do it all. And it's like, well, that's not really true, but it's a conversation that we're currently having.
Well, and season 1 of Picard also talked a lot about, and like you addressed, the agency of the AI, right? But this time, instead of being like the Measure of Man, where the guy is like, he's just a tool. It's just a tool. We're going to take it apart. We're going to make more. It'll be great. In Picard, it's more. They're trying to say, well, we don't want to. We don't want them to be oppressed or whatever, but we don't want them to have agency either. And so that was it. There's a lot of interesting subtext, and even the kind of cheesy nods for, and this was all of the seasons, there were little nods towards the fans in explaining certain things. Even those little cheesy nods towards the fans explaining certain things, like aging of immortal beings. But in that case, they explain it and then they don't dwell on it, which is nice. But it did seem a little cheesy. But even with those, there's still those serious subtexts in all of the seasons. And it's kind of interesting. My argument with my husband has been, he's like, I like the episodic ones. I like them having resolution in one episode, but the way that the Picard series has been put out, those issues can't be resolved in one episode. They're too complex.
Yeah. And it's nice to see them hashed out.
Yeah.
So Ken,
Yeah,
I
I
see
just want
you.
to say one thing. Do not remember the Picard system. I liked it. But one thing else it brought up, especially at the end, was another use for the same technology. That was extending a human's life.
Yeah.
Because remember, then after he died, they put him in an artificial body.
Yeah.
Which opens up all kinds of other
Right. And it does open up all other potential sort of things as we get into season 3. But I'm going to sort of shivvy us along a little bit because I have a clock in front of me. And so I want to make sure we get to talk at least a little bit about everything. So we might have to circle back around to Picard because it's great and we want to talk more about it. But Ashley, you are talking about one of the other greats that's come out and the one that sort of welcomed in this golden age, and that is Discovery.
Yes, Discovery kind of kicked off the new resurgence of Star Trek. So Just like when TNG came out, a lot of the original series fans were like, and so Discovery got a lot of that. Discovery has gotten a lot of like, oh, I don't know about this. And the first episode, I was just excited that there was new Star Trek to watch because I got to actually watch it as it was airing. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. I'm so excited. So the very first episode, I remember that one of Roddenberry's visions was it was a utopia. All of the conflict was going to be coming from outside of the ship. They were going to be completely great, no conflict within the team. She phasers her captain. First episode. So I was just like, that's not, Roddenberry's vision, but then I stopped myself and I'm like, don't be that person. Enjoy the fact that there is Star Trek here, be grateful for what you have. And taking myself out of that mindset of comparing it to previous series really helped me enjoy it a lot more. Discovery, I think, is very different than any of the other shows. I think Discovery standalone is very different from any of the Star Treks we've seen, even the ones that have come after. It's pre the original series when it comes out, and then it's post Voyager. So it's like it spans two different timelines, which anytime there's time travel, it just gets weird. So I forgive the little inconsistencies and things just because it's hard to do time travel, especially when you've got all of this established canon that's happening in the middle of it. But the biggest question is, why have we never heard of Discovery? Why are we not using spore drives? Why didn't Voyager have a spore drive to get home instead of having to go, 80 years and use a copy of it? So the biggest thing with that is that Stamets was the one who could run the spore drive, right? So if he was the only one who could run it, he's in the future right now. So no one else is going to be able to even use the spore drive. We're not into capturing tardigrades anymore, so that's good. And it also, Section 31 ordered it to be destroyed, so it's a top secret thing at this point. And that's happened before in canon, where technology has been put off to the side and we're not allowed to use it or even reference it anymore. And that's very Star Trek. That's a very Star Trek thing that's happened. So those are the biggest critiques I've heard. Also that it's too woke. There's too and it is so queer, and I love it because that was part of Roddenberry's vision that he didn't even know was his vision yet, because at the time that wasn't even something that they were worried about addressing. But all Star Treks, like Wendy was saying, they've always addressed social issues, and the biggest one now is that people are people, all of them. It's a concept, right? So Discovery is, I know, I was like, sorry.
Depeche Mode was right all along.
So, I love how just accepting and inclusive it is of everyone. The little queer family unit they have with Hugh and Paul and Adira and Greg. I love that. So good. There's just, and it's not a big deal. They had Hugh and Stamets, they just kissed on screen. They were brushing their teeth, getting ready for bed. So it's they had the first interracial kiss on TV, and then they had this, and it's just not a big deal. And I love that it's just, this is how it is. So I'm really loving it. I love Grudge. Grudge is a queen. The cat. So, oh my gosh. I love Grudge so much. That's another thing that I really love about it is, Grudge is amazing. And they have a druid. One of the characters is a druid, which is awesome. They're bringing all elves. So, but it is more arty than episodic, like we were talking about before. So there's a lot of the longer arcs to really delve into things, because the concepts that Discovery is covering are not things that can really be covered in an episode. So it's the longer arcs, which is cool because you get the time to jump into it. So, yeah.
What I was going to say is it's a big nod towards the Darkwing Meteor. A lot of the other series kind of touch on it.
Yeah.
Enterprise did a little bit,
yeah.
But there's a huge nod to that. And then for the Spore technology drive, which I thought was really cool, actually, it's kind of a nod to Voyager, because Voyager uses that symbiotic biomaterial type of neural connects, right?
Yeah, yeah.
For the ship, so it's a nod towards Voyager. It is. I got him up to like season 3. It's kind of difficult because what they did with the Klingons, and you know, that was a huge complaint from a lot of people.
Yeah.
Just the way they appear, the fact of it kind of deviates from what we know from like the original Star Trek and Next Generation of how the Klingons are. But yeah,
What did they do to them?
I definitely like the fact they did a huge nod toward inclusive everybody. I mean, you're supposed to be an utopian, you know, this is society's utopia. All the other series really didn't touch on, you know, having different, you know, having queer folks, having people that are straight, you know. It's totally inclusive, and I think, not to be forward, but New Strange New World's kind of doing that too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I love that series. I'm addicted to that.
Yeah.
With you asked about the difference.
Yes, I was going to say with the
What is
Klingons,
very different?
yeah, they look very different. They delve more into the houses and unifying the houses and breaking them apart and all of that. So they get a lot more into the Klingon structure.
The culture and stuff.
Yeah.
Which is
And
cool.
one of the things that we see that is very cool is that they're bald in the first season.
Yes.
And everyone's like, what is this? It was a major complaint in season 1. And
Who's who my Klingons?
one of the things that were established canon after that with Klingons is that in times of peace they have no hair. In times of war they grow it out.
Oh,
And so I'm like, that's really cool. That's a piece of lore that we didn't have before. You know? So it's like people complaining, I'm like, just trust the process. There's a reason, like, it's coming.
Well, we also, there's so much that we think we know about Klingon culture, but there's so much that we kind of don't.
Right.
And I like the fact that, you know, especially through Discovery and everything, you're starting, you begin to find out various things that you didn't know that Worf didn't tell you because Worf didn't spend a huge amount of time with his own people.
Well, Worf did not, if you remember in Deep Space Nine, when they went back to the Enterprise in the original series, which was a great episode, they look at Worf and they're like, and he said, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
It was the Tribbles episode.
Trials and tribulations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't want to talk about it because they're like, why do you look so different? And so he didn't reveal it, but they made it a joke. It was like,
It was really good.
that was
And then brought it,
What were you saying,
at that
Chaz?
point, they also brought it full circle, I think, in Enterprise, to explain why it happened. It's because they, all the smooth forehead types were augments.
With human DNA.
With human DNA.
Yeah, the way I look at it is, and I mean, this isn't canon, but the way that I look at it is that Klingons probably experimented a lot, or at least delved a lot into body modification. And they tried lots of different things. You know, maybe they wanted to infiltrate the Federation, so they tried to make a whole bunch of Klingons look more human, so that it can be spies and things like that. So I think. So yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, that's the way I kind of look at it. So it's like, if you have ridges and, you know, you're into a lot of ritual and you're doing a lot of stuff, you know, they don't do tattoos. So maybe there's some other way that they can go, well, how can we as Klingons look more badass? You know?
Yeah. And so with Discovery being the new one that's kind of coming out, it's for a whole next generation.
Right.
It is the next generation. It is TNG. Like my bonus kid and my partner back there. This is his introduction to Star Trek as they're going through Discovery together. So it's really cool because he's now getting to go through what I did with TNG and my mom. You know, I also feel like if you don't start with the original series, it's really hard to go back and watch it. Like even seeing like TNG, trying to go backwards, it's really hard. If you start with TOS, it's great. And I'm really wondering if that's how it's going to be for the people who start with Discovery, even going back to TNG. You know, because it's dated. You know, so I'm really interested to see how the implications it has with everything. So
Thank you, Ashley. We'll probably come back and hit on things, and also there will be time for questions and answers before we wrap up. So, Tanya and Chaz, I'm not really skipping you. I'm just going through the order of
just be sat down in
You're just special. You're in the sandwich
Sure.
you know, because you're so special. You are special, actually, not to be sarcastic. Tanya, you're going to talk about Strange New Worlds, and that sort of like comes out of Discovery. So I'm really excited to hear what you have to say.
And I was like, I didn't start watching all of this new content until a year ago whenever we got access to Paramount Plus.
Someone's a pusher.
And but like, you know, I've read just little bits of stuff. I basically went in almost blind because I knew I would see these things eventually. So I didn't want to like totally spoil the big things. But I knew about Strange New Worlds and I was excited because like I said, I started mostly with Next Gen, and I have watched little bits and pieces and read about things from the original series, and like, honestly, I didn't watch much original series because my mom didn't like it, and I was an impressionable kid.
What?
Pretty sexy.
Are you still living under the same roof?
Well, I'm 45, I'm 46 years old, and she's dead, so no. Anyway, I knew Christopher Pike was a character from the original, like, canon or whatever, like the unaired pilot, and I knew about the menagerie and cage and all that stuff. And like, I didn't have time to rewatch any of that stuff. I'm only addressing the here and now, and some Mount Christopher Pike with his fabulous hair. So, like, it was really cool because I got really excited when they introduced him in Discovery. I'm like, it's Pike! Oh my god, that's number one! Because I knew that at the very beginning of Star Trek, the original series, number one was supposed to be, like, I was supposed to be a big deal as a female first officer. But it didn't happen. And when I learned that didn't happen, and like, at the time, I remembered like at the time hearing that like they didn't think that like people weren't going to respond well to a woman in a role of command. And so to me, having Rebecca Romaine as Una Chin Riley, which P.S. she didn't actually get a name for many, many years until there was a canon Star Trek novel written. And so I felt, to me, that her having the role as first officer was like righting an old wrong. And so we meet both of them in season 2 of Discovery. And then, of course, when everyone watched it in first run, they were probably like, ooh, are we going to get to see more of them? And so then it was nice because we're watching it at home, and I'm like, we gotta watch season 1 of Strange New Worlds when this is over. Because some friends had recommended, and like if you haven't, they had recommended like finish season 2 of Discovery, watch season 1 of Strange New Worlds. Yeah. Because like if you went all the way through and then started back again, you might forget some stuff. So we watched like season 3 of Discovery and season 1 of Strange New Worlds concurrently. But anyway, enough of that. This show is just so cool to me because it is like, it's continuing the thing of like diversity and inclusion. And it's really cool to just look at the bridge and see like a really good mix of people. Like there's a comic book writer that years ago I saw her at a con, and she talked about being criticized for making a comic that was primarily women heroes. And she told the person who was questioning her, when you have enough women, the world feels real. And if it doesn't feel real, then it's bullshit. And that's the thing that I thought when I first looked at the bridge of Pike's Enterprise. Because you have all these amazing people. And like women in these like really cool roles. And everybody's just great. And I love that we get to see like kind of like almost like you get to learn Uhura's origin story. Mm-hmm. And like I wasn't familiar, I didn't realize until like I don't know, last year that Binga was an original character from the original series. But they're all so great. And like I love that as they go along they kind of make references to other series and other things that have happened, that like events and things that we already know about. And we get to see like Kirk when he's just coming up. Mm-hmm. Now I didn't know Kirk had a brother.
Sure.
And I think it's really, it's just so fun. I have seen people complain about all these women on the bridge. Wow. And I'm just like,
that's typical.
Right?
Unfortunately, that's typical.
Right.
Yeah, it really is.
But it's like, what's wrong? You don't think that she can pilot a starship?
She flies the ship.
Right.
Her whole thing was
It is
flying
her.
the ship.
She flies the ship. She is the best pilot. So good.
Yeah. And so like, and part of me when I hear that, it's like you were saying, Ashley, if you go in and you find something that jars you, and you can choose to go one of two ways. You can be like, well, that's not the way I remember it. That's not the way I think it should be. Or you can just say, well, you know what? Let's see how this goes. And if you persist in the first mindset, then maybe this isn't for you, and you just should stop watching it and stop complaining to everyone else.
Or be open-minded.
Right. Just be open-minded.
Well, what I like is how Uhura and Nurse Chapel were totally, the stereotypical female from if you watched the very first original Star Trek. Now you get to see them in these totally different, very strong, like
They've been
Nurse
given
Chapel
dementia.
is totally different.
right.
You see, you kind of see the glimmer of her being a firecracker in the original series. You get to see her young, and you see her background. This woman can kick ass. She's awesome.
She's amazing.
Yes,
Like
and I
her
love
and
the
Benga
character.
were like in the war together.
Yes.
And like that's actually like this era of Star Trek because like if you grow up like watching Next Gen, they talk about the Klingon War.
Right.
You hear about it from the original series movies, and that's actually one thing that I was kind of excited about. The discovery, I'm like, oh shit, it's the Klingon War. We get to learn about the Klingon War. This is great. And of course, it's war, so it's terrible, but it was an interesting part of history from Star Trek that I didn't know. So I thought it was really interesting. And then, like that episode they had of Strange New Worlds, where the guy comes on board and everybody has to reckon with what's
Yes,
happening.
exactly. That was a good episode. That was really so.
And to speak to the Nurse Chapel point, some of the reading I was doing after somebody, like, I'd go, because, like, after some of the episodes, I'm like, oh, I saw this headline that, like, I wonder what, the ramifications were, like, how is it that they're tying these together? That there was an article I read, because you have, like, the relationship between Nurse Chapel and Spock.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
And there was an article I read where they felt that putting this relationship there, because I guess, according to this article I had read, there was sometimes some, like, sort of unrequited timing going on between them.
Yes.
And they felt,
Yes.
like having them have this relationship explained that. Because, that when they move, because like moving forward, that's, doesn't really go, it's not going so well at a certain point. Because we learned in the musical episode that she's been accepted to this prestigious program.
Right.
And she hasn't told them.
That was a great episode.
It was, which brings us to the musical episode.
Yeah.
I got very excited because, like, my favorite musical episode of television is Once More with Feeling for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And when we watched it, I was like, people who made this episode, they know that episode. This is clearly, I was like, Once More with Feeling walked so that Space Rasty could fly. Because to me, and like, I'm a Patreon of like a buffering rewatch podcast, and there was like a bunch of us in there at one point, like, there's nods. There are clearly nods to Once More with Feeling, like scattered in different places, just a few. But it was such a good episode of television.
If you haven't seen it, Klingon boy band.
Yes.
The best part.
Yeah. And just it was the same sort of vibe as Once More with Feeling. People singing about the things they don't feel like they can talk about. And it was so it was sweet and poignant and delightful, and at some points very awkward, like when Pike and the captain are on the bridge and basically kind of airing their business.
Yes, that's funny.
Which, as a completely unrelated aside, I love that that Melanie Scarfano, who played Winona Earp, is in Star Trek.
That's so good. So before we move on to our next section, would we each like to share a favorite song from the musical episode? Because it is packed full of awesome stuff.
So good.
Wendy?
Wow. Yeah. I think of her as
Yeah.
That's my favorite.
Yeah.
I need to. I was just enjoying it so much in the moment that I don't remember any of the specific songs except for the Klingon boy band. That was. I lost it.
Too many other songs.
That's it. Just that over and over.
I don't remember what the name of the song is, but it's the opening song.
Was peculiar. I think that's, I don't remember what it's called.
Yeah, that was fantastic because I mean, no, I wasn't expecting them to start singing,
No.
and then they do that, and it was like, oh. And because I sing, I'm usually a little bit more critical whenever people want to do music because not everyone can sing. You can tell. It's like, oh, that's been auto-tuned. Or, oh, they're a little flat. Okay, that's fine, I guess. But you know, but they weren't. They could all sing really, really, really well. And I was like, oh, I don't have to critique this at all. I can just
Every
enjoy
cast
it.
member singing that, you're hearing their voice.
I was reading that a lot of them have a musical theater background.
Yes.
Well,
They needed to bring
Jerome
Anthony
has an
back.
album. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he was probably sitting at home going, oh, man.
Started on Broadway. The actor who plays Uhura started on
Oh,
Broadway.
nice.
They got their
That
break in
makes
the
sense.
musical. That's what they're actually known for.
Oh, that's so cool.
The original Uhura was also a singer.
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
She's
yeah.
a singer and a dancer. She
Yeah.
was super
She was in
talented.
everything. She was amazing.
She was everything.
I think my favorite song, I don't remember the name of it, but it was La'an's.
Oh, yeah.
That's so poignant.
It was so good.
Yeah. So I got to save myself for last, so I'd be like, all of those are great. I love all of them. I don't have to pick, right? I really do like Nurse Chapel.
Yes.
And,
Oh my God,
Yes.
that was so good.
amazing. And the whole dance routine when it goes like, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I saw somebody in an article this morning, like when Spock walks in and like basically sees his girlfriend like singing it, like she basically is singing like a breakup song.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, this is awkward.
And he's singing in the corner going, wait a minute, I'm the ex. Oh.
Oh.
That was actually a little heartbreaking.
Yeah, it really was.
It was, because it's like he came out of nowhere.
100%. It was very poignant.
And you get to
moment.
see his vulnerability
Oh,
and his
yeah.
humans. And it's a shock. And then you realize that that's where he gets later in the years.
Right.
He accepts his humanity.
I think, yeah, and I think like just to bring it to like, say it again, like that's one of the things I love so much about this is that you get to see these characters kind of like grow up.
Yeah.
It's like one of the moments I loved was in one of the episodes when Kirk is on the Enterprise for some reason, and then like they pan out at the end, and he joins like Spock and Uhura at a table. And then of course at the end of season 2, when they're in this like this bombed out town because of the Gorn have invaded, and they like find somebody, and this Scottish accent comes from all the
Yes, Tony.
Is it? Yes, it is at last. So we are coming close to the end of our Star Trek love. We have 2 series left to talk about, and we have a little bit of time. Chaz, I'm going to talk about Lower Decks. You're not obligated to talk about Prodigy, but would you like to, or would you like to?
Sure, I'll talk about Prodigy.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so Prodigy is their very, very kid-centric series. Not necessarily a lot of Star Trek fans will probably watch it because it is very focused on basically presenting Star Trek to a younger audience, to the point where the younger audience doesn't have to grapple with a huge amount of complicated social issues or try to read a lot of subtext or metaphor or symbolism or various things along those lines. But it does prep them for that. So that when they watch the series, watch the other more adult-oriented series later on, not adult as in X-rated, but you know what I mean, then it really kind of gets them in the mindset of, you know, if you're watching it with your children, you can say, hey, so we just watched this episode of Prodigy, this was really cool, this happened or that happened. What do you think of this? What do you think? How do you feel? How did this make you feel? What do you think they were really talking about? And it gets things on a level to where the whole family can watch it and everybody can discuss it, because discussing Star Trek is really like a big major part of, I think, why we love it so much. Because we can watch an episode and really enjoy it and then go watch something else, you know, I guess drag racing or whatever. But But it's being able to, especially come to a convention and talk with everybody about certain episodes and what they mean, and so when this happened, when the character said this, what was that whole thing? And somebody else can go, oh well, I think it meant this, and somebody else can go, well, no, I'm not sure about that. I think it really meant this. But you're having this really great discussion. However, when you're a kid, you kind of get left out of those discussions because there's so many things that are kind of over your head that you just don't have life experience. Yeah. So with Prodigy, it gets them into Star Trek. It gets them to start thinking about these various things, and then everybody can have those conversations, and they can be included in those conversations because they understand what's going on. And so, for me, I feel that Prodigy is incredibly important because if for no other reason, it gets children to start forming their own opinions and to think for themselves without other people telling them how they should feel about this or what they should think about that. They get to decide for themselves because this is on a level that they can understand inherently. You know, they don't need anybody to explain it to them because they get it. And so when they start to understand it, then they begin to enjoy it a lot more. When they enjoy it a lot more, then later on, as they get older, they're going to want to watch maybe the original series or Star Trek Next Generation or something like that. They'll want to watch those things on their own because it's like, oh, this is also Star Trek? Oh, well, cool. You know, let me at it. And I find that to be incredibly helpful, and it definitely helps to grow the fan base so that we constantly get younger people that come up and want to be part of the thing that we've been raving about for 20, 30, 40 years.
I think if that was me as a kid, I would find it kind of empowering.
No, for sure.
Because I would be because I think a lot of time just thinking about that, a lot of times, even if there are deeper conversations, kids are left out because nobody thinks they can contribute.
Right. Yeah.
Which really sells a lot of kids short.
Right. Well, I mean, but that's empowering is a really good way to think about it. We get it. It's a really good way to think about it because I remember when I was a little kid, I wanted to be included in those conversations. I wanted to talk about those things too. But unfortunately, there was no one my age or anyone around that wanted to pay that much attention to me to go, wow, Chaz, what did you think of this Star Trek episode where people are white on the right side and black on the left side? It's like, oh, I have an opinion. Oh, okay, never mind. So wait, I'll wait. And that's how you feel as a kid. You're constantly being, well, you'll get this when you're older. It's like, I kind of get it now. Yeah, can we talk about this now? So, yeah.
I'd recommend Prodigy in its own right. I watch it because I'm a completionist. And
that's fair.
Yeah.
I thought the first...
You looked well put together.
I thought the first half dozen episodes are pretty slow, but then all of a sudden, as I'm watching more episodes, I'm realizing this is becoming good science fiction, good storytelling. And then it seemed to morph more into the Star Trek mode of telling stories of each individual, and it just felt more and more like canon. So I recommend it, even as an adult, as a worthy part.
I'm really looking forward to it hitting Netflix because by the time we got around to it, because we were trying to watch them more or less in the release order, kind of, and there was been a big thing where they'd been canceled, they'd been taken off Paramount Plus, and we were like, well, now we're going to watch it. Yeah. And so we were very excited to see if there had been enough of a ruckus raised that Netflix has saved it.
That's awesome. Oh, that's good. And plus, it's Janeway, and so
yes.
That's kind of a gateway into
I'm all about Janeway.
Oh, yes.
I love the Janeway.
So back there has a question.
Yeah, I see 2 comments or questions, and we're gonna get those, and then we're gonna wrap it up with Lower Decks.
I think really one of the biggest problems that I'm seeing, and we could do an entire hour on this alone, is you have an established fan base over an incredible amount of time, 50+ years, and dealing with canon issues. Then going back to, as an example, with Lon Mooney and Singh in Strange New Worlds, and my fallible memory is but they didn't know anything about Khan back then. And then I went back and watched Spacey, and they knew about it. It was But it took a lot to tie all that back into it, and I think it's a real credit to the writers and producers and the showrunners that they're able to tie in this vast history.
Yeah, I know that with Star Wars, there is literally a person whose job it is to kind of try to keep track of the canon. I think I don't know if it's his actual title, but in one of the fan groups I'm in, he's kind of been referred to as like the keeper of the canon. It would not surprise me if there is at least one or more people for that role, in behind the scenes of Star Trek.
Star Trek seems to have a better hold on
Yeah.
keeping the canon than Star Wars. I'm both fanatic fan of both, and
that's absolutely valid.
Yes, I find Prodigy to be visually stunning, and I wondered if you had anything to say about the art.
I have a lot to say about that. However, I will keep it somewhat brief, which, people that know me are like, you? Really? Artistically speaking, I love the fact that it's very, very saturated, that the characters are incredibly fluid moving, so much so that I feel that for younger audiences, and for me as well, I find it's a lot easier to get into the characters because the animation is so good and because the character design is so well done that you stop thinking about them as animated characters. And I believe that is probably the entire point. But everything is so smooth and everything is so very well done. You go down on the planet and it's still really colorful, but maybe in a different way, or maybe they use a different color palette, etc. So it's very neat. There's also the situation where the character design for them in their regular clothing as they first get on the ship establishes them in one sense. But then when they put on the uniforms, now it's symbolic of the fact that now they are a family, they are a complete team. And for children to be able to see that visually is incredibly cool. Because you don't have to beat them over the head with the fact that, hey, we've learned teamwork. They're like, no, we're all wearing the uniform. So now we're all on the same page. And now the kids can go, visually speaking, it's really, really well done. Yeah, it's gorgeous. So.
Thank you, Chaz. And thanks for taking Prodigy. It felt really good to have a visual artist talking about that.
Well, of course. Anytime.
And we're going to come back to your question because I want to talk about Discovery, and we're not Discovery, Lower Decks, and we're running out of time. So please don't forget your question. So the comic is going to talk about Lower Decks, which is also very pertinent. And listen, one of the things I love about Lower Decks is that it's funny, but something I think is really important is something Bruce mentioned, something we've all talked about. None of this new material is putting down the old material. All of the new Star Trek loves the old Star Trek and is uplifting it, righting wrongs, doing things that the old writers were not able to do, giving characters moments to shine and to be fully realized. And it's marvelous. I've been watching Star Trek since I could basically walk. And so I teased on old school. I grew up with Next Gen. I did not spend time with Enterprise. It was tumultuous breakup years. And then I've come home with Discovery and Strange New Worlds. But the one that is my love song to Star Trek, that I go to for comfort and joy and fulfillment and everything I need as a long-term Trekkie, is Lower Decks. It is so genius, and every episode is very referential in a way that if you're a fan, you're like, oh my God, did they do that? They did that. Oh, thank you. But also, you don't need to have seen literally all Star Trek to get the humor. It's for adults, unlike Prodigy, that can be for kids and adults. Lower Decks is not for children. It's definitely delving into undervalued underbelly of Star Trek, such as it is. Right? Thank you. And it's also like, it diffuses some of the preciousness. It's like, yeah, but like, how do they actually get all of that done? And let's talk about how they show you the best PR of the Federation, but it is the PR of the Federation. The reality is that we have to go out and clean the barnacles off of the ship. We gotta, clear out the scoopers, to use some seaman terms. I don't know what they mean, but bear with me. And like, there is interpersonal dynamics. No matter what Roddenberry wanted, people are people, and like, it doesn't matter if you're Orion or Vulcan. They're going to be talking to me like, what? Oh my god! Did you snore all night? Like, come on, man. And we have to share bugs. So that part I think is so joyful and reverent, and also does a great job of never taking itself too seriously. I also love that it was sort of born out of social media a little bit. So the writer, Michael Mann, ran a Twitter account back when it was a good place called Star Trek The Next Generation Season 8. And so we had all of these like fantastical ideas of like, what could have come next from, TNG? What was waiting for them? And he sort of runs with some of those like, what if, what could have come next? So this is, it's considered that Lower Decks happens after the Nemesis movie, and so it's kind of in the TNG era, which is delightful. And speaking of love songs and uplift, before we wrap up, we do have to talk about, and I guess I should say, as much as it's reverent and full of laughter, it is also talking about more serious topics in a way that is like accessible for people. Sometimes you need comedy to talk about really heavy things. And we talk about really heavy things in a beautiful, thoughtful, respectful way in all of these shows. And then Lower Decks is like, yeah, man, but we were written by Gen Xers, and our tool is laughing at ourselves and talking about our suffering. So strap in.
Because somebody's got to clean the holograms. I'm just saying. Just saying.
Do they really use it for that all the time?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh no, not Dr. Donna. Oh no. If you've seen it, that makes sense. If you haven't, you have such a gift. But let's wrap up by talking about that Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks crossover. Do I think it was the best ever episode of Star Trek? Yes, I do. Okay.
Getting to see Boimler do his walk in human form.
Oh, I know.
Do that.
It was
So
good.
good.
Yes. I think that was just the best part, is getting to see like the actors be their characters in the show.
Tanya Gouchenour too is just,
oh my god, she's so
I love her
great.
so much.
Well, and you know what? They really put a lot, like the costume department is working so hard on all of these shows, and they were like, yeah, we even made sure the shoes were right. I was like, yeah, you did.
Yes.
So good. So would anybody like to like throw out a last thought about that crossover or anything else as we're wrapping up? And yes, if you have a question, now is your moment. I see you. But I'm going to give these guys a moment.
One thing I want to say about Lower Decks is, if you like it, not to self-promote, but kind of self-promote, I do an all-femme gaming podcast called Memory Alpha, where we play a role-playing game in the Star Trek universe. And when Lower Decks came out, we were like, this is our game. Like, this is our show form. Like, it's just as irreverent and everything. So it's another thing for you to enjoy that is definitely not Star Trek canon. But if you are not offended by Lower Decks humor, you might like it. So it's called Memory Alpha.
Memory Alpha, yes.
I would say that Lower Decks at first seems kind of irreverent. I was always one of those people where it's like, well, you can't make fun of Star Trek. You can't. Star Trek isn't a comedy. Come on, it's serious stuff. But then after the first couple of episodes of Lower Deck, I was like, oh, okay, that is funny. They do that a lot. Yeah, that's kind of weird. And so you start kind of not taking it as seriously. And it's cool that they have that kind of humor, which again isn't about them punching down. It's about them just kind of noticing the same stuff that we notice. Like, wow, there's certainly a lot of episodes where they're in a cave.
The same cave.
Yeah, another cave. Tell us about your cave mission. Wow.
Yeah. I think that the thing I love from the crossover is that all the stuff that happened in Strange New World with Una and like having to fight this day in Starfleet.
Yes.
The and she's feeling some kind of way still. And Boimler is completely starstruck.
Yes.
And they break the rule of telling about the future for them to tell her, you're on the recruitment poster.
Damn, I thought it was so cool.
And I think I actually teared up because she just looked so like, oh, okay, it's all worth it then. It's gonna be okay. You know, it's gonna be okay.
So, you've been so patient, and you, sadly, last question, so if you would.
Well, I'm a huge Deep Space Nine fan. I heard one quick reference. I just wondered if any of you could put it, some Discovery and Below Deck sounds great. I haven't explored them yet. I might have to get Paramount Plus or wherever they are.
You should do it.
Yeah. Are they both on Paramount Plus?
Everything,
Oh, great.
everything
Okay.
except Prodigy.
But I wondered if anyone wants to speak to Deep Space Nine and maybe put it in that context or something, or any other fellow diehards for Deep Space Nine.
I feel like Discovery and Deep Space Nine are actually a lot more similar than any of the other ones because they have kind of the darker overall feel to it, the conflict, and the kind of art, like little more of a story arc type thing in the seasons instead of episodic. Like DS9 was the first one that brought us like the big Dominion Wars and stuff like that. So I feel like if you're a big DS9 fan, I think you'll like Discovery. I think it's got the same kind of vibe to it.
Yeah.
But also there are a lot of guest stars in Lower Decks. Like Kira.
Love to see.
They
Oh,
have,
yeah, I'd love to
yeah,
see her.
I love it.
And like their security officer, like was like was like kind of like one of Kira's comrades at one point.
Oh yeah.
So like it's great.
Yeah, one of the other things about Deep Space Nine in terms of Discovery too, and I'll keep this really quick, is that as you touched on, it talks about basically you start to see the Star Trek universe, but from other people's perspective, which is very, very important, which is unlike the way it was in TNG, where everything is really cool and wonderful and very hopeful. Now you get to see it from everybody else's perspective that was like, well, we don't like the Federation, and we're all like going, wait, what? What do you mean? You know, and you start to realize that it's a utopia for most of us, but other people have their own version of utopia, which is not the Federation. So I think those questions get kind of addressed, and I think that's really cool. So
Wendy kind of touches on there.
We're out of time.
We are out of time.
Thank you for listening to the Creative Play and Podcast Network. If you enjoyed our show, please check out D&D Journey of the 5th Edition and Ragnarok Enroll a Scion Hero to Ragnarok Story. Also, check out our Patreon page for more content and behind-the-scenes things, as well as joining us for a one-shot game or two.